Call this meeting of the Legislative Commission on Pensions and Retirement to order. This being the first meeting, we've got housekeeping to do here. And the first order of business is to elect a chair. Representative Berg, if you want to make a motion.
Thank
make
you.
a nomination.
I nominate Kali Her for chair.
Kali Her's been nominated. Any further nominations? Any further nominations? If not, all in favor of Kali Her be chair of the Pension Commission? All, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Congratulations, and I'll hand the chair over to you now.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really happy to see all of our senators and representatives here, and I'd have to say this is probably the most active commission. There's a lot more people here than the other committees that I go to, so we're glad there's so much interest. I'm really excited about leading the work in pensions this year with this amazing team. There's a lot of work to be done, and I've been meeting with members of this team, and we are ready to start doing this work. And so thank you so much, everyone, for choosing this commission, and let's get going. So with that, I think our next order of business is that we are to elect a vice chair. And so.
Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am. Senator
I wanted
Pappas.
to jump in before anyone else could do it.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I'd like to nominate Nick Friends as vice chair.
All right, Senator Pappas nominates Senator Nick Friends as vice chair. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Okay, with that, no other nominations. All those in favor say aye, and those.
Aye.
Aye, and those opposed say nay. All right, the motion prevails, and Senator Nick Friends is elected as the vice chair of this body. Did you want to say a couple words before we move on?
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Wonderful speech.
Our next order of business is nomination for secretary. Do we have any nominations for secretary?
Madam Chair, I'll nominate Tim O'Driscoll, Representative Tim O'Driscoll.
Representative O'Driscoll. Representative Nelson nominates Representative O'Driscoll as the secretary of the Legislative Commission on Pensions and Retirement. Are there any other nominations? Any other nominations? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed say nay. The motion prevails, and Representative O'Driscoll is elected as the secretary of this body. Representative O'Driscoll, did you want to say a few words? All right. That wasn't part of my, motions here, but I just want to make sure you all have a chance to contribute to this great work. And so with that, the first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Representative O'Driscoll.
Madam Chair, since I was on the commission at the time that meeting transpired, and those meetings are from that time frame, I would make a motion that we accept the minutes from May 16th, 2022 as presented.
Representative O'Driscoll moves approval of the minutes from May 16th, 2022. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And any of those opposed say nay. The motion prevails, and the minutes are adopted. On to our next item of business. It is to receive an overview of the LCPR and Minnesota's public pensions from our staff.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
Before
Representative
we do that,
O'Driscoll.
Representative Nelson skipped through item 1, introduction of members and staff. I don't know, maybe you pick that up at the end, or if you want to do that at this point.
Actually, you know what? That is a great time for us to do that. Why don't we go ahead and do introductions of members? I will go ahead and start on the House side here. If we can start with Representative Nelson.
Representative Michael Nelson. I represent part of Brooklyn Park, and I've been in the legislature. This is my 11th term, and most of those terms I've been on the Pension Commission.
Thank you, Representative Nelson. Representative Wolgamott.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good morning, committee members and members of the public. My name is Dan Wolgamott, and I was recently reelected to my 3rd term representing District 14B, which includes St. Cloud and Minden Township. This will be my 1st term serving here on pensions, but I'm very excited to work with each and every one of you to do some good things. Thank you.
Representative Berg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Kayla Berg. I represent 55B, which is most of Burnsville. This is my second term and also my second term on the Pensions Committee.
Representative Chow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Representative Ethan Cha from Woodbury 47B. This is my first term and first time on this commission. And I'm excited to be here in Humboldt. Thank you.
Good morning, Representative Tim O'Driscoll. This is my fifth or sixth term on the commission. Have been the chair of the commission, been the vice chair of the commission, have done great work with folks in a bipartisan way to be able to help stabilize our pensions. And this is an ongoing event. And so we are once again convening for the purpose and mission of addressing the issues that are facing our plans right now, and look forward to working with folks to be able to continue to keep those plans solvent. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Danny Nadeau. I was newly elected this year from Hennepin County. I represent the cities of Rogers, Dayton, Champlin. Happy to play a part on this commission.
Why don't we go ahead and move over to the Senate? We could start with, why don't we start Senator France as the vice chair, and then we'll move back to Senator Pappas. Is that okay?
Right, we should switch.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Looking forward to working with you and everybody on the commission. My name is Nick Frentz. I'm the senator from North Mankato, which is District 18, roughly described as the Mankato area. It's my third term in the Senate and now part of 3 terms on the Pension Commission, and really looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Senator Sandy Pappas. I think I've been on the Pension Commission as long as Representative Nelson, if not longer. I've been the chair, I've been the vice chair, I've been the secretary, and now I'm happy to pass on the torch to Senator Friends. I'm from St. Paul.
Senator Murphy.
Good morning, Madam Chair. It is good to be with you and everyone this morning. My name is Erin Murphy. I serve in the Minnesota Senate, representing a district in St. Paul, District 64. My seatmate is Chair Herr.
Senator Seaberg.
Good morning, I'm Senator Judy Seeberger. I represent District 41, which is on the east side of the metro, from Grant in the north through Lake Elmo, down through Cottage Grove and Hastings, and I am thrilled to be here on the Pensions Commission.
Good morning. I'm Carla Nelson. I'm in my 5th term in the Minnesota Senate. I represent the western part of Olmsted County, includes parts of Rochester, and then all of Dodge County. My 5th term in the Senate, a little bit of House experience with Rep. Nelson back in the day, and very glad to be on the Pension Committee.
I'm Senator Jeff Howe. I represent District 13, which basically wraps around St. Cloud, and I'm in my 3rd term in the Senate.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. Jordan Rasmussen. I represent 5 counties in west central Minnesota, and this will be my 2nd time serving on the Pension Commission.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. And let's also introduce our staff as well. If we maybe could start at Susan.
Good morning. My name is Susan Lenczewski. I'm the director of the Legislative Commission on Pensions and Retirement. I've been with the legislature since 2015 and came from private practice where I did pensions for the federal government as well as Cargill and Enbridge and a bunch of corporations. My colleague, who would be here, Chad Burkitt, is actually out sick today. He's the deputy director, and his prior experience is with MSRS as the legislative liaison.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Lisa Dieslin. I'm the commission assistant. I will date myself and let you know that this is my 23rd year in this position. I'm the one who will send you all these emails. You will note in your packets, you have all your materials, but you have a folder called Standard Packet Items. It contains some informational items, including the commission's rules, the principles, some other information, actuarial, which will be updated. There'll be a few more things that will be added to it. You may also use this folder to put anything in it that you want to keep from meeting to meeting. So just put it in that folder and we'll leave it in there for you. Please let me know if you have any questions, and welcome back.
Thank you, Lisa. And we have 3 additional staff, actually. Nick Stumo, Langer, Madison, and John, if you could all maybe just stand up so people can see who you are and just introduce yourselves quickly.
Nick Stumo, Langer, Committee Administrator assigned from the House to assist Chair Herr. John Wheeler, DFL Research assigned to the Pensions Commission.
Hi, Knoxon. I am Chair Herr.
Thank you.
On the Senate side?
Yes, Senate, please.
Ryan?
Hi, I'm Ryan Majerus, Senate UFO Research.
Anybody from Republicans?
Joey, GOP Research.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'm Kali Her, I'm a state representative in St. Paul. And did we get everybody in the Senate side? I'm sorry.
We
Was that?
did, Madam Chair.
Okay, wonderful. I saw you looking at me like maybe I'd forgotten someone. So I'm a state representative in St. Paul, and this is my third term on pensions. And just a little bit about myself. So I actually came from the private sector. I started my career at 21, actually, in retirement plans. And I came in during a time of when DC plans were sort of exploding. A lot of private companies had switched over from DB plans to DC plans. And I used to think that defined contribution plans were it. They were the solution to all of our retirement problems. And really coming into understanding that when we have people who work for public institutions and they have a defined benefit plan, that it is in our best interest to protect those individuals and their plans, and that shifting the responsibilities onto employees in times when markets are difficult and people are expected to have their own expertise, and it's something that when people study years for, I think that it is a huge responsibility for us to remember those individuals and take good care of them for the sacrifices they've made for doing their jobs. And so I'm happy to be here and to be leading this commission with all of you. So with that, I think that we've covered all of the getting to know everyone. And what I'd like to do now is move on to our next order of business, which is the overview of the LCPR and Minnesota's public pensions from our staff. So Lisa. Is it going to be you? Okay, perfect.
I wish Lisa could do it. So Chad was going to help me with this. He was going to do about half of it. But I heard last night that he was sick and wouldn't be able to come in today. So forgive me if there's a little stumbling around here as I do the slides that Chad was going to do. Also, as I'm going through this, I beg you to ask questions. It will be much more interesting, and frankly, I'll be able to catch my breath. So please, please ask questions. This is a complicated subject matter. This is hard going, I think, but I'm going to try to keep this very high level, knowing that if you do have questions during the meeting, you'll ask, and also afterwards, please feel free to call, stop by, send an email. Any questions are fair game. In pensions, there is no dumb question. So moving right into my PowerPoint here. The commission was established in 1967. It is in Minnesota Statute Section 3.85. It's a very short statute, but it does provide some authorizations and duties for the commission. Some of those duties are to hear bills and make recommendations. Also to provide oversight of the pension plans, their actuarial status, funded status, and also to study pension and retirement topics generally, which is an interesting part of the commission's duties and a little bit different, I think, than what you might find in a committee. Moving on to slide 3. The commission has 14 legislators, as we all know. I think the most important part is that the bills that we hear here in the commission are on a sort of informal referral from the committee of record, which is for most bills the state government committee in the House or the Senate. The chair makes the decision about what bills to hear. If you want a bill heard, if a bill you've authored is something you'd like heard by the commission, you will need to contact Representative Herr or Madam Chair or the staff, so Nick Stumo-Langer, who we met a minute ago. The commission meets during the session as well, occasionally during the interim. Moving on to slide 4. As Lisa mentioned, we have rules that were adopted some time ago. I think the most important part of those rules has to do with approving bills. That requires a majority from each of the houses. So the House needs 4 legislators, the Senate needs 4, in order to approve a bill and send it on for consideration by the State Government Committee and then to the floor if it's approved there. Moving on to 5, we have some beautiful headshots, just so you can, if you see me in the hall, you'll remember what I look like. Chad, as I mentioned, is not here, but will be working with me through the session, as well as Lisa Dieslin, who you've already met. The role of the staff. We are a nonpartisan staff. We are here for the entire legislature on any topic, on any pension topic, any pension issue, retirement topics, but primarily we serve the commission. So we help with meetings, we help the chair with any, with agendas, and help her with selecting bills if there's some information she needs for that. We prepare the minutes. An important thing that we do also in our staff's offices is Lisa Dieslin is an expert with Extend, which is the revisor system. So we are able to draft bills, and we have a pretty quick turnaround as a rule with those bills. So send any bill drafting to us, and we will work with Lisa to get that done and send it back to you for review. We also prepare memos on the bills, which are similar to what Senate Council and House Research do, although we do also, and I'll just flip over to slide 8 for a minute here. We have a screenshot of the first page of one of our memos. This is kind of the format we tend to follow. It can vary from memo to memo, but this is the general format, and it is a section by section, just like Senate Council and House Research, but we also provide an analysis of policy considerations, legal considerations, other things that you might want to know when considering the bill, some data often, and some cost assessment. Moving over to slide 7 then, or back to slide 7. I'm going to skip this slide because we do have our actuaries here. The commission has its own actuary. That is Van Iwaarden Associates. Now they have had a name change. They are now VIA Actuarial Solutions. Mark Schulte and Emily Knutson are here to present to you as the next item on the agenda. One thing I will note is that the contract with Van Iwaarden was just recently renewed for another 2-year term, and so will expire in January of 2025, which means that this commission will need to consider an RFP in the summer or fall of 2024. Moving on to slide 9. This is a screenshot of our website. We maintain the website, and I encourage you to go to the website, have a look at the drop-downs. In particular, we have information under the meetings tab, which is all of the information you'll need for the current meeting, as well as all the past meetings. And there you can find audio recordings of those meetings. So should you want to listen to anything that you've heard about, any presentations in past meetings, that's a really good resource. We also have a pending bills page under pension legislation. That drop-down will have all the introduced bills that relate to pensions. And we also have a related interest section, which has all these Social Security no tax bills. Those are there as well. We also have a drop-down for the actuarial reports. As I mentioned, you're going to hear a lot about our actuarial work that we do, which is very important for pensions. It's a forward-looking into the future to make sure we have assets available in, say, 10 years to pay out the benefits that are required to be paid out. Those actuarial reports are all provided at this drop-down. So I would encourage you again, take a look, see what the pension plans are doing. Then we also have plans and other links, and this will get you to, say, MSRS's website and TRA and the State Board of Investment under that link. And then finally, information and documents, just a treasure trove of a lot of history and also some of our more current materials. Also, on our website, we do have a graph that shows the State Board of Investment's investment returns for various periods, which is kind of nice to take a look. They had a great year 2 years ago, not so good this last year. You can see that graphically if you go into the website. Moving on to other business that we conduct here in the Pension Commission. The plans need to come forward with any changes to their actuarial assumptions, and this commission reviews those and approves them. Actuarial assumptions are very important to accurately predicting those future liabilities and assets that will be available for payment of benefits. In addition, the commission does hear reports, 2 of them that I expect that we will hear, subject to the chair's decision on that. One is the supplemental state aid work group report that the state auditor has published. That is available on our website. Another one is the Department of Labor and Industries study entitled Adequacy of Disability Benefits for Minnesota Police Officers. I don't know if that right now is linked on our website, but we'll make that available. That too was just published, I think on January 13th, 14th, so it's very new, and it can be accessed on the Department of Labor and Industries website. Moving on, also we receive a lot of annual reports on different things, and those too are accessible on the website under mandatory reporting to the LCPR. There's a lot of detail here that I won't go into, but one of the reports is this investment business recipient disclosure form, which the volunteer firefighters, the relief associations need to publish every year. Those are sent in to us every year. And in addition, there is some information there about 403B plans, which are the teacher defined contribution plans, information about funds available through some of the school districts and their fees and investment returns.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Ms. Lenczewski, could you just explain what an investment business recipient is?
Yeah, I can actually. So I ran a copy of one of them before I came to the meeting today. It's a one-pager, and I can show you this. I think that it would be great for the commission to consider with this, whether this is still a good idea. It provides really very minimal information, but it is a statutory requirement that they provide it to us. So all of the reliefs, and we have over 500 of those, send these to us. It does list the type of investment that they're invested in and who manages investments for them. Some of them are sending all their assets over to the State Board of Investment, and that'll be listed here. Some of them are using an outside manager. That too will be listed here. But I can just pass this around if you'd like to have a look. So that's what we are receiving every year, but this is something that if the commission would like to dig into, I welcome it, because we get them maybe from half of the reliefs, the other half don't bother with it, but it is a statutory requirement.
Thank you.
Ms. Lenczewski, quick question as well. So once they are filed, what do we do with them? Do we compile it and create a report, or are we just hanging on to the forms at this point?
Yes, Madam Chair, that is correct. We're just hanging on to the forms right now. Every so often, a legislator will ask us for a report, and then we will compile a report, but until we hear why whether anybody wants this information, and we don't spend a lot of time on it. And as I mentioned, compliance is not good. It's probably about 50%.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Senator Pappas.
Madam Chair, as I recall, I don't remember when this came up, but I think the concern was, it might have been during the Dayton administration, that local fire relief associations, instead of getting the high rate of return that they would by investing through the SBI, were using, just parking their money in a local bank. So it was just kind of a transparency issue to show, you could really do better if you invested with SBI rather than maybe you had colleagues or friends or business relationships with the local bank, and that's why the money was parked there.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. Senator Nelson.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. If we're going to come back and discuss this later, I have some questions. If this is just a brief overview, I'll just save my questions till we discuss this issue later. So, Madam Chair, will we be discussing the investment business receipt disclosures at a later time?
Senator Nelson, it looks like we will be, so we'll
Okay, I'll
definitely
save
send
my
if there's a question you want to ask now, you can, but we'll go ahead and make this a topic.
Sure, I'll just put it out there very briefly. My question was, talking about transparency, and I understand from Senator Pappas's comment why this was important, but if these things are not available in a searchable form that the public could use, they aren't very valuable, would be my indication. And so the thought would be, I can see why this is important for transparency and accountability, but in order for that to be so, they do need to be in a searchable database available to the public. We can talk more later.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. Ms. Lenczewski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Rasmussen has had some dealings with this over the last couple of years, and he might be able to help a little bit. There are other reports that go to the state auditor that actually do provide very helpful information about fees and where they're invested and that sort of thing. It is very helpful over there. It is searchable. It is available over there. We have thought for a long time that this should go over to the state auditor, but it is coming to us, and we have such minimal staff in terms of time to actually enter this in a database that would be helpful to the public. But
Senator Rasmussen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As someone who's gone through the individual disclosures, I appreciate that we're talking about them today and would be happy to work with any commission members who are interested in making this information more helpful. I do think it is an important topic, and just from having gone through it, we see a wide variety of investment strategies. Some are invested solely with the SBI. Others have it parked in a CD. And so I do think that level of transparency, and if we look at the number of pension funds that this commission is charged with, overseeing, the vast majority in terms of number are these volunteer relief associations. And so I think it is an important topic, even though they're not as large monetarily as some of the statewide plans. It's still an important area for us to keep track of.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen, and we will go ahead and put that as a talk for us to discuss in greater detail at a future pension meeting. Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I just want to comment for Director Lenczewski that I appreciate you raising this here at the beginning as a new member of the commission. I hope and encourage that you will continue to share with us where you think there are redundancies or things that are no longer serving our purposes. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator Murphy, and Ms. Lenczewski.
thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Murphy, Senator Rasmussen. I will also note that this is all state money. No employee contributions in these pools of assets. Moving on to slide 12. This is going to be, again, a very quick overview of the state pension system. We have 3 large statewide funds. Those are the Minnesota State Retirement System, Public Employees Retirement Association, and the Teachers Retirement Association. The Minnesota MSRS is the pension for all the state employees, and there are a number of categories of state employees. They each have their own plan. We have correctional state employees. These are in the state prisons. And we also have the State Patrol Retirement Plan, the judges, legislators, the unclassified plan, which is something that you are all in unless you have been around long enough to be in the legislator's pension plan. And then finally, the Minnesota Deferred Compensation Plan, which is not a pension plan. It is a defined contribution plan. But these are all under the administration of the Minnesota State Retirement System. In addition, PARA, as I mentioned, PARA has a number of categories of employees that are covered each by their own plan. The one you'll hear a lot about is the police and fire plan. And that is having, I think we've got several bills that are being proposed by PARA related to that plan. In addition, there's a local government, local correctional retirement plan that is for the employees in let's say, the county jails. And then there is a defined contribution plan over at PARA. It's a small plan just for elected officials. And then finally, there is something called the Statewide Volunteer Firefighter Plan. That was actually established several years ago, and the intent was to gather up these volunteer firefighter relief associations, centralize them all in this plan that is administered by PARA. They are able to move over voluntarily, so there's not been a lot of movement from their local controlled relief associations to something that is administered by PARA. And then finally, teachers' retirement. That is for teachers. That's the pension plan. Moving on to slide 14, we have one remaining local teachers plan, and that is St. Paul Teachers Retirement Fund Association. And then finally, Minnesota State has its own several plans. They are all defined contribution plans. It is possible that later in the session, we'll hear a presentation from Minnesota State so you can understand what they're doing over there a little bit better, which is different than the pension system. Next to each of the names of the systems, I've included chapter numbers. The plan documents for these plans are the chapters. So if you want to know anything about vesting, what the benefit formula is, eligibility, pull up the chapter that's noted here, and you can find out a lot of details about really anything you would have found in the private sector in a plan document. Each of the plans also have summaries of their plans, and those are available on their website. Moving on to slide 15. All of the assets of the plans are invested by the State Board of Investment. So the boards of trustees or boards of directors of the pension plans do not invest the assets. A very important distinction from many states. So we send all of our assets, all of our contributions over to the State Board of Investment. They have both the State Board of Investment and the Investment Advisory Committee or Commission or Council, IAC, they invest the assets.
Madam Chair.
Senator Pappas.
Ms. Lenczewski, doesn't St. Paul teachers, they still do their own investing, though? Were you going to say that?
Ms. Lenczewski.
Madam Chair, Senator Pappas, you are correct. St. Paul does its own investing. Yeah, so St. Paul has a dual duty of both administering the plan as well as investing the assets. The new executive director of the SBI was formerly with the St. Paul teachers. We will have a presentation from SBI next week, and you can pepper her with questions. There is a new executive director, and he is in the audience today. And so too, you may want to introduce yourself to him. Phil, I think is over here. Yeah.
Ms. Lenczewski, if I could, if any of the individuals who lead a plan is here, could they just stand so that people can see who they are?
Introduce themselves?
Yeah, and introduce yourselves, please.
I'm Phil Petzik, the new executive director at St. Paul Teachers. Previously worked for a pension plan in Spokane, Washington. Been here about a week now.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here from a plan?
I'm Erin, Leonard, the director of MSRS, and I will be hearing from me later today.
Doug Anderson, executive director for PARA.
Morning, Jay Stoffel, executive director of Teachers Retirement Fund, Retirement Association. We'll be reporting next week.
And
I'm Holly Bateman. I'm the legislative liaison for the Teachers Retirement Association. I'm Amy Stringham, the policy coordinator for PARA.
To SBI too. And SBI, I see Jill is here as well, Ms. Schertz.
Jill Schertz, State Board of Investment. Feel free to not pepper me with questions.
Thank you. I think we got everybody. Now go ahead and turn it back to Ms. Lenczewski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Moving on, these are slides prepared by Chad. So I will actually excuse myself from going through these slides. This is data about the number of members, also about the funded status. I think very interesting in that you can see on slide 17, the giant in the room, and really there's two of them, TRA and Parageneral. And then we have the really relatively small other plans, public safety plans. Parapolice and Fire is a pretty good-sized plan as well, but you can then see what the assets are as compared to liabilities. Liabilities are benefits. So pension benefits are the liabilities. You can get a good graphic comparison of how assets stack up against liabilities. I've pretty much, I think, gone through number 18, or slide number 18, but I will mention that unlike in the private sector, where most defined benefit plans do not have any employee contributions, in the public sector, that's a really important feature, which is that employees are required to contribute a part of their salary to their pension benefit. Very different than the private sector. So they have much more of a, I don't like the word entitlement, but I'll say that they feel that this is really important because it's not just a gratuitous employer benefit, but it is something that they've contributed to, and they find it, something that they need to keep track of, and that's why many people attend the Pension Commission.
Madam Chair.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Lenczewski, if we go back to page 17, am I reading this right that if we were looking at the total market value of the assets on this page and the accrued liability, that across all of these plans, we have about a $12.4 billion gap if we were to look at this on an actuarial basis, that we effectively, there's a gap of $12.4 billion, that in order to fund all these plans to 100%, that's the one-time cost that it would take.
Ms. Lenczewski.
Madam Chair, Senator Rasmussen, that is absolutely correct. In Minnesota, we typically haven't, I think, striven for 100% funded. It has happened in the past, but for many years now, we've been less than that, anywhere from 95% funded down to, I think, in the case of St. Paul, perhaps in the upper 60s. So that is true, 12+ billion.
Senator Rasmussen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just think that's important, concept for especially new commission members to understand is that, as a state, we effectively owe money, towards the liabilities and the benefits that are currently been promised to public employees. And so just understand that from a state's balance sheet perspective, this is, if not the largest, one of the largest liabilities we have as a state. And I think it's just an important thing for us to keep in mind as a commission.
Madam Chair?
Representative Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just want to refute one thing, or maybe have a different opinion about employers putting in the funds and employees not investing in them. I come from the building trades, and every year when we have our raises, we allocate from our raise how much, instead of going on our check, we put into the pensions. So those are really employee contributions that go into those. And while some people look at that as an employer contribution, if those weren't put in the plan, if the employer didn't provide that plan, that's money that should be going on a person's paycheck, their take-home pay, for them to invest themselves. And I guess that's a little bit of difference of opinion on when you say that employers put it in there, so it's a benefit they give them. It's something that's usually negotiated, and it's part of their pay package. The building trades, we call it total package, includes what we pay into insurance, for health insurance, what we pay out of the check, what we pay in a vacation fund, what we pay into our pensions. All those things are part of our total package that we take home. And again, that's the way I look at it coming from the building trades. We should also look at that with our employees. If we didn't put that money into a pension, that should be money that we should be paying these employees. And that's part of why people come to work for the state, is because they know, and public employment, because they know down the road they're going to have a pension when they retire.
Thank you, Representative Nelson. Ms. Lenczewski?
Thank you. Thank you, Representative. So moving on to slide 19 and 20, slides 19 and 20 are about these volunteer firefighter plans. We have 527 relief associations that provide retirement benefits. You can see the number of firefighters that are active right now and covered by those. Those are a mix of defined benefit and defined contribution plans. The defined benefit plans are kind of an anomaly because they only pay out in a lump sum. There are a few, well, maybe even a couple that pay a monthly benefit, but almost all of those are in lump sum payouts. And then the para-statewide plan, which I mentioned. The goal there was to move all the reliefs there, but that's happened to some extent. So 203 departments are with the statewide plan at para. There is a graph then on slide 20 that shows market value of assets as compared to the accrued liability. One thing to note is that the assets in accrued liability does include defined contribution plans. Those plans cannot have a surplus. They're fully allocated, so every account in those plans it has all of the assets. All the assets are fully allocated. So the defined benefit surplus, again, only relates to defined benefit plans, but you can see there's a sizable surplus. So that's just assets that are sitting there that will not get used unless the benefit amount can be increased. And there's a lot of detail on how to do that and whether that can be done very easily. Moving on to slide 21, defined contribution plans that the state administers. Those are listed here. The one you should all be familiar with is the unclassified plan. That is your plan, unless, as I mentioned, you've been around long enough to have the legislator's pension plan. Supplemental plans. Those are really interesting. So every public employer is permitted to have a supplemental plan, and a supplemental plan is just something in addition to the primary pension plan. So the state made the decision that everybody's going to have a pension, except, say, Minnesota State. Everybody's going to have a pension, but you can, as a public employer, also have a supplemental plan, but within limits. And those limits are laid out in 356.24. I would encourage you to take a look at that. There is not a lot of compliance there with those limits. We know that from calls we have received, but that's something that the commission could certainly take up if there's an interest in it. Moving on to slides 23 and 24, just a little bit about fiduciaries. The most important thing is that none of you are fiduciaries. So your house is not on the line due to the decisions that you make here. On the other hand, the executive directors of the plans and their boards and the State Board of Investment, they are fiduciaries. They are fiduciaries in the sense that they are like a trustee of a trust. They have to act for the benefit of the beneficiaries, the members. And interestingly, under Minnesota law, which is unique in the country, fiduciaries in Minnesota owe a duty to 3 entities: members, the taxpayers, and the state of Minnesota. I don't know how you manage that duty, but that is what is in our law. And that's, it would be good to find out from our fiduciaries how they manage that. So no limit on legislative action in terms of a fiduciary duty. Moving on to the last few slides here, there are a few limitations on what the legislators can do with our plans. There are 2 constitutional provisions that apply. One relates to judges. During their term of office, their compensation cannot be reduced under Constitutional Article 6. There are court cases that have interpreted compensation to include pensions. There's also a prohibition on special legislation. So that is legislation, say, for one person. The commission does those, and we approve them. But if there can be a general law, a special law is prohibited under the Constitution. So something to ask yourself as we're taking up these special laws, could a general law fix the problem? And then there is federal law. So we have an overlay of federal law that does dictate certain things about the pension plans. If the plans fail to comply with federal law, and these are all in the Internal Revenue Code, the plans will not be considered qualified. And hence, there would not be an ability to defer current taxable income under federal law. So this is subject, of course, to the IRS finding out about this compliance problem and then assessing some penalties and tax liability. But that is something to keep in mind as well. As we're making changes to state law, we do need to comply with federal law. I can help you with that if you have any questions. So, and then finally, our last slide, our names, our contact information. I invite you to call, email, anytime.
Thank you, Ms. Lenczewski. And I would like to just lift up this team. When I was new onto this commission, I used to meet with Ms. Lenczewski every week to go over just questions that I had or trying to understand the plans. And so know that our team is very capable, and that if you need some extra time with them, just set up some time to speak with them. With that, and are there any member questions? Any additional member questions? Wonderful. And I should have done this early on at the beginning of our commission meeting, but I also want to be very respectful of people's pronouns, and I did not ask for people to share their pronouns. I know that everybody works really hard to get to where they are, and I always try to call you by the titles that you've earned, whether it is senator or representative or Miss or Mr., but I also know that not everybody adheres to those social conventions. And so when you come up, if you would prefer a different pronoun, if I call you Ms. Lenczewski and you would prefer a different pronoun, or that you would like to be just for me to use your first name to honor that, please let me know. I will do my best to accommodate how you show up to work in this space. And so with that, I would, and there's no other questions, I would like to move us to the next order of business, and that is a presentation from the Commission's actuary on their role and work on LCPR. And once you are all situated, if you could identify yourselves for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Mark Schulte from Via Actuarial Solutions, consulting actuary, and with me is my colleague Emily Knutson, and we're here today to give an overview of the work we do as the Commission's actuaries. So I'm going to turn over to Ms. Knutson to just give a general overview of the work we do, and then towards the end, I'm going to go over some general actuarial concepts. I'll get a little bit of math today, not too much, but just sort of a ease into it because we're going to be hearing about a lot of technical topics this session. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair,
There is. Lisa.
Sorry. Representative Nadeau.
I was just wondering if there was a document. Sorry.
Sorry.
That's right.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Senator?
Thank you so much. My packet does not have the spreadsheet or the Minnesota Public Pension Plan stats. I would
we'll make sure you
appreciate
get
a
a
copy
copy,
if
Senator
there's an
Nelson.
extra one. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd like one of those as well.
Do we have extra copies?
We do, there should be one.
It's in the,
This document is the one.
It is. I'm sorry, it's underneath.
You don't have it.
got it.
It's in the
Okay, thank
standard
you.
operating.
And it's a year old. We're updating it, but it's not quite ready.
All right, wonderful. Mr. Schulte and Ms. Knutson, if you're ready to start your presentation, please go forward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today we'll briefly describe our role for the commission, discuss the projects we completed in 2022, give an overview of upcoming projects that we're going to be working on, and briefly go over some important actuarial concepts. So our role, we are the LCPR actuary. The pension systems each hire their own actuaries, and we provide another voice with an objective opinion on actuarial topics, and we also review and comment on the information provided by the system actuaries. The system actuaries do 4 main projects. The first one of the most important ones, is the funding valuation. So the employer and employee contributions are set in statute, and the funding valuations calculate the liabilities, use the current asset value to determine if those contributions are going to be sufficient to provide the promised benefits. It also provides the current funded status of the plan. Another important thing that's done every about 4 to 5 years are the experience studies. So the actuaries use many, many assumptions to try to predict the future as best they can, and those assumptions need to be reviewed to make sure they are in line with what actual experience has been over the past few years. And along with those experience studies, refinements to those assumptions are made. The next one is the accounting reports, and that just provides some additional information that goes into the financial reports, the annual financial reports. And then there are additional consulting projects as requested by the systems, maybe some projections to see how things are going to look in the future, maybe different assumptions, how those would change the liabilities. Oh, sorry. And now what we do is we look at all the reports provided by the system actuaries and provide commentary on that. One thing we do are valuation replications. Those are really in-depth. We get really in the weeds on those. We get the raw data from the systems, build our own model based on the plan provisions provided and the assumptions, and replicate the liabilities, the assets, the sufficiency calculations, and make sure that those all look good. The valuation reviews are more high level. That's more, do the methodologies and assumptions meet actuarial standards, the LCPR standards, our professional standards. We provide insights on presentation. Experience reviews are similar high-level review where we review the methodology and any assumption refinements that are being recommended and comment on the reasonability of those. And then any other projects as requested by the LCPR. Recently, we made comments and suggested updates to the LCPR actuarial standards as one example of those projects. In 2022, we did a replication, that's the in-depth replication for the MSRS State Employees Retirement Fund, the big one. We independently calculated all the liabilities, the funded status, the contribution sufficiency calculations. We were able to replicate it to a high degree of accuracy, and everything looked great. We also completed valuation reviews, those high-level reviews for the parageneral, MSRS state employees, TRA, and St. Paul teachers. They all look great, clean bill of health, no worries. The other thing we started reviewing was the investment return assumption. This is a really important assumption that goes into what we think the assets will do in the future. That is an ongoing discussion.
Senator Rasmussen?
Madam Chair, and I don't know if this question is best for Ms. Knutson, but was wondering on the timing of the review of the investment return assumption when this commission would be getting that report.
Ms. Knutson?
Madam Chair, I'm not sure what the end timeline is on that. We are mostly consulting on this and providing some additional information, but it's really up to the systems. And the investment return is currently set in statute, so it's also going to be up to the commission if any changes are made. So we're just here to provide additional information, and we don't really know the timeline. That's kind of out of our hands. I don't know if you have anything.
Mr. Schulte?
Madam Chair, I think Susan, Executive Director Lenczewski probably has an idea of timing if that topic's going to be on the agenda in future meetings.
Ms. Lenczewski, if you want to comment, but we have had discussions around this, and we will actually be having discussions around the assumed rate of return. But Ms. Lenczewski, did you want to comment additionally?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. The only thing I would comment is that the plans, each of the boards of the plans have come up with a recommendation regarding their rate of return assumption. Two of the plans, actually three of the St. Paul teachers, para and MSRS, have a request to change their rate of return from 7.5 to 7, that assumption. So I don't know about TRA. I think we'll need to talk to Jay next week, Jay Stoffel, on that. But yeah, that'll be in front of the commission at some point.
Thank you, Ms. Lenczewski. Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to the question for clarification, you said that you are working on the rates of return. Is that analyzing Minnesota's, or is that analyzing what other states are doing or other public pension plans are doing? Maybe just a little bit of an expansion on what that phrase meant, that we're analyzing that. Just a definition of what that means.
Thank you, Representative O'Driscoll. And I don't know if Ms. Knutson or Mr. Schulte will answer that.
Madam Chair, Representative O'Driscoll. Yeah, we just received updated letters from the systems with the retained actuaries' recommendations for investment return assumptions. So we've started reviewing those, and if the topic comes up at one of the future commission meetings, then our plan is to be able to provide some commentary on those when appropriate or when asked to.
You can proceed with the presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For future work, this year we will be doing more replications of some of the smaller pension plans that haven't, to our knowledge, been replicated before. Those include the MSRS State Correctional and State Patrol, and then the Para-Local Correctional and Police and Fire. This year we're going to focus on MSRS State Correctional and the Para-Correctional, as well as St. Paul teachers. And we have received the data, we have started building our model, and those are in progress, and we should have those for you in April. Next year, we'll focus more on the State Patrol and Police and Fire, and then we'll also be reviewing some experience reviews next year, some new assumption recommendations from the big plans, Parageneral, MSRS, state employees, and TRA.
Ms. Knutson, can you just maybe provide clarification on what is the difference between a replication and a review, and how you decide which one will be replicated versus just reviewed?
Sure. So, Madam Chair, the replications are the in-depth where we match the liabilities and we match the assets in all the calculations. The review is more we step back and do a high level, do things look reasonable, are things following the stated methodologies, so more presentation inputs, more that kind of high level. We have worked with commission staff to decide which are on tap. We try to do it every few years to make sure that each one is looked at every couple years without doing them all in the same year.
Thank you, Ms. Knutson. Proceed.
I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Mark Schulte now.
Madam Chair, Commission members. So as Executive Director Lenczewski mentioned earlier, there's a lot of statewide plans. We have the larger plans that most folks are familiar with, but also they range anywhere from MSRS general plan to the volunteer fire relief plans, of which there are over 700 of them in the state. So there's a wide array of plans in Minnesota. But in general, what the actuaries, whether the retained actuaries or us in our role, what we're concerned with is the main question is how much money needs to be put away today in order to pay benefits that are promised in the future. I mean, that's the key concept from an actuarial side. I won't say it's regardless of what the benefits are, but given the level of benefits that have been promised, we try to do our best to model out what we think those costs are going to be. If there are adjustments to benefits, whether up or down in the future, then those are later built into the model. But given the facts today, we need to calculate what we estimate the costs will be in the future and how they're going to be paid for. And I will also highlight one word on the ones that aren't underlined here is promised, because these are promised benefits. So we want to do our best that, given these commitments have been made, what kind of payment structure should be set up to fund them. So very briefly, what we do as actuaries is we gather all this data on the members in the pension plans, whether they're active members currently contributing, retirees receiving benefits, and then we build models to predict out how long we think folks are going to work, what their income's going to be, that all goes into their pension benefits, and then when they're going to retire, how long they're going to live and receive their annuity payments. And it builds out these projected benefits for a very long time. And this is a concept that's kind of unique to our profession, which is we're trying to model out costs up to 100 years in the future. And we readily acknowledge we cannot predict the future, but these are promised benefits, and we need to do our best to at least estimate what we think those costs are going to be. So the picture on slide number 12 is for one of the statewide plans, what their projected annual retiree payments are going to be. And right now, they're a little under $2 billion per year, and they're projected to go up to about $3 billion per year over the next 30 years or so, and then gradually decline. And this is for a closed population, so assuming no new people come into the plan, which is not what actually happens, but our models just take a snapshot each year. That's how these actuarial reports are prepared. So when we look at it, what we can do is say, well, that's a pretty significant commitment if we're going to be paying out billions a year in retiree annuities. And so when we look at the concept of how are these plans funded, the idea is, well, the money is set aside now to pay for benefits paid in the future. And those monies are invested at the SBI generally. So what is that expected return? And this is going to be a concept that will come up many times during the session here, which is the investment return assumption. And really what's going on is you put in money and you have a promised payment. Well, that payment, if you earn 0% return, you just have to come up with either $1.5 billion this year, $3.5 billion 30 years from now, whatever it might be. But by harnessing the power of investment returns, really it's those investment earnings that are intended to pay off a large portion of the future retiree benefits. And what we generally see is 60 to 70% of future benefits promised to these retirees are funded through the investment earnings. And that's really because these are such long-term promises and long-term commitments that the systems can afford to go deal with the ups and downs of investment markets. That's the general concept of how pension plans are invested. So in slide 13, what we've just done is a simple illustration of, well, instead of 0% return, what if we earn the stated 7.5%? And just for an idea, the power of the investment return assumption is in about 2052, about 30 years from now, we can see that for about a $500 million contribution today, we expect that would pay for the full $300 million or $3 billion retiree set of payments that year. So it's really that compounding effect. We've also modeled in the bright green, well, what if instead of 7.5, we only earn 5%? Well, then you need more money today in order to pay for that same future benefit that's been promised. Going forward a slide, just on a more of a micro level, another way to look at it is if you've promised a $1,000 pension payment and you assume that you can earn 7.5% per year, then you could put $115 away today, compound for 30 years, and you'd have $1,000. Well, what happens if you only earn 6.5%? then in the future, you would only have $760, so you have a shortfall of $240, but you've promised the entire $1,000. So what that means is that there a future contribution is gonna be needed, but ideally that you have assumptions that are valid now so that you don't have to do additional contributions in the future. You're making those payments while folks are working, while they're able to contribute to their pension plan. So just a general concept of the funding of these pension plans, why the investment return assumption is so important to the long-term sustainability of the plans. And so I'm just gonna finish up too that you'll hear about different assumptions of what do the funds assume that they're gonna earn in the future. And, the assumptions evolve quickly, and that's one of the issues with having the investment return assumption set in statute is it doesn't respond very quickly sometimes. And generally the past few years especially, there's been a lot of evolution in capital market assumptions, what investment advisors think that they're gonna earn prospectively. Also in these decisions, it can be easy to kind of mix different concepts of, we have different policy decisions, how does this relate to the investment return assumption? From an actuarial perspective, we really like to keep those separate, that, we want our base set of assumptions that we're confident in as far as developing these models, modeling costs. Adjustments to benefits or other policy decisions, those cannot necessarily be made in a vacuum, they interact, but to the extent possible, we like to at least have the actuarial models be based on best estimates on those promised benefits today. And lastly, it's just to realize that opinions are gonna differ. You're gonna hear that the systems have different recommendations or boards of what they wanna use for an investment return assumption. And that's okay, there's, as I mentioned, nobody can predict the future exactly, but we have a lot of information available to us, and we really just wanna make sure that we have reasonable estimates and that our best estimates based on the data available today. Madam Chair, that's all we have to say today, prepared remarks, but we're glad to take some questions too.
Thank you, Mr. Schulte and Ms. Knutson. And if you have a question, please raise your hand. I see Representative O'Driscoll is first on the list.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Going back to slide 14 for just a second. The one just before this one, I believe, yes. There we go. Madam Chair and members, it's kind of important to look at the 7.5% to 6.5% and what happens to the payment that goes out. And I want to ask the actuaries if they can comment if on the other side, if we had left the rate of return, 7.5% or even drop that to 6.5%, but the amount of dollars that we pay out per pensionee goes up. For example, we have a 1% COLA that's built in. There's been some conversation last year about a 1.5% COLA. If they could maybe comment about what that would look like on the other end as well.
Mr. Schulte?
Madam Chair, Representative Driscoll, just for clarification, are you asking what the effect of having an additional COLA would do on that liability payment or the cost for it?
Representative O'Driscoll.
Madam Chair, and to the testifier, yes, and again, I guess it's maybe somewhat rhetorical in nature, but if you increase the amount of outflow without backfilling either through return or additional investment, you're gonna have that deficiency in funding speed up faster than anticipated, or it's gonna shift the current model that we're making assumptions on as to what we would need to have in the way of cash flow and investments to be able to meet those future obligations. And I just want to see if my read on that is right when I say it's rhetorical or if I'm missing something.
Mr. Schulte.
Madam Chair, Representative Driscoll, yeah, you're correct. And we would always say that if a benefit is going to be enhanced, there should be funding to pay for that change. Again, the benefit security, otherwise you create an additional deficit by promising a benefit and not having a funding source for it.
Thank you. And Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question has to do with the assumed rate of return, and that has tended to be the issue that the legislature, we have assumed rate of return in law, and yet that lags what's happening in the market. And so that, I think, is perhaps why we have some of these unfunded or more of an unfunded situation. And my question is one of just what are other states doing? Do other states have the assumed rate of return legislatively defined in law. It seems that it's perhaps not the most efficient way to run retirements.
Mr. Schulte.
Madam Chair, Senator Nelson, yes, there's a wide variety of how the investment rate of returns are set for different statewide systems. I'd say you're not in the majority with having it set in statute. Our recommendation would be that it would be set in either the actuarial, the LCPR is actuarial standards, so it can be a little bit more of a living assumption and a little bit easier to review and adjust when needed. Generally, what we've seen the past several years is systems looking at their capital market assumptions, working with their investment advisors to get new best estimates of what do we think things are going to do going forward. And it's really challenging given, we've seen the past few years, the markets have been way up, they've been way down. But over time, what do they really expect long-term? And then making adjustments, it's not easy to lower that discount rate assumption. Some have done it in incremental progress. They have a plan that we're gonna get to a certain level. We're gonna lower it by 25 basis points this year, 50 basis points, and finally get maybe a full 1% decrease. Others have also, as long as they're reevaluating their investment return assumption, is looking at the investments themselves. And that's important as plans mature and you have more retirees, more outflows, that there's going to be more cash requirements to pay these retiree benefits. And so what type of portfolio should you be invested in for the long term? That's beyond us as actuaries. We're not investment professionals, but it's definitely a concept that we consult with our clients on, which is, how do you best reduce the risk of the plan so that you don't have such large swings in funded status when there are changes in investment returns different from what you expected.
Thank you.
Senator Nelson?
Yep, just to follow up. Thank you for that. And this is something I'd be interested in looking going forward. How can we better manage so that we don't end up in these situations where we have such unfunded liabilities? And it would be good to know what other states have done and what their experience has been as far as, because the way we have it set up, it does look like it just is not going to be an efficient way to manage manage promises and what the market is doing. And our market is certainly volatile, and it seems to be getting a little bit more volatile. So perhaps this is a good time for us to examine some other alternatives.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. And just to give, I know we only have about a little over 15 minutes left, and we have 2 plans left to present, and we have one more other question, but I just want to, for new members here, there are a number of factors or criteria that our actuaries or our plans actually have the ability to, not the actuaries, but our plans actually have the ability to adjust and change. The rate of return assumption is the only one that's in statute that has to actually be approved by the commission in order to change that. And so this is kind of what the discussion is around so that we understand there's one piece that we have to actually approve. And if you have anything to add on to that, Ms. Lenczewski? Okay. So we will definitely have further discussion on this particular topic. We do move slower than the market does. My husband does investments work, and they're constant, every 3 months, they're readjusting their assumed rate of return, and so I think it's something good for us to explore again at this point. Representative O'Driscoll. I'm sorry, Representative Nelson, not Representative O'Driscoll.
I know we both look alike, right? Anyway, Mr. Schulte, what happens to the funding status of when you look at it on paper, when you lower the assumed rate of return or raise the assumed rate of return? What happens to the outlook or what the plan looks like? I mean, if you're at 80% funding today at 7.5% assumed rate of return, and we lower it to 7 or to 6.5, how will that affect what the plan looks like, the funding status?
Mr. Schulte.
Madam Chair, Representative Nelson, that's a great question, and you'll see specifics when the 2 statewide funds come up and talk about some discount rate sensitivity. But what happens is, because there is lower expected rate of return, that means lower expected assets, so your liability measurement increases, so you're gonna have a lower funded status. So decreasing the discount rate will increase your liabilities and lower your funded status, and vice versa. I will say it is a bit of optics because the investments are going to earn what they're going to earn. And it's more about truing up what the optics are by adjusting that discount rate, so it's based on reasonable and current expectations.
Thank you, Mr. Schulte. Senator Friends.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I know we're running a little bit late, but as the discussion has morphed into assumed rate of return, this isn't really an actuary question, but as we lower the funded status, we then make it tougher for COLA payments, increases in benefits, and protecting the very men and women that we are here charged with trying to provide for. So that a fair point is, when we lower the assumed rate of return, we lower the funding status, which Wall Street likes, but the working men and women of Minnesota who want to see additional benefits may not love quite as much. Fair enough?
Mr. Schulte.
Madam Chair, Senator Friends, I would say that, yeah, lowering the funded status can have policy effects depending on if those COLAs are tied to the funded status. And we'd encourage that if there's concerns with level of benefits, that additional funding sources be identified.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam
Follow
Chair.
up, Senator Friends.
No,
Thank you. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question for Mr. Schulte. Mr. Schulte, does changing the assumed rate of return change the actual return?
Mr. Schulte.
Madam Chair, Senator Rasmussen, absolutely not. You know, the investments are gonna earn what they're gonna earn. It's all a matter of the optics and the measurement of what you think that the funded status is. Yeah, it doesn't change the actual rate.
Follow up, Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Schulte. I appreciate that point being made. I think it's important for members of the commission to understand that the assumed rate of return helps do a math calculation. And if we want to have the most accurate information as a commission, if the plans have the most accurate information as to what the actual rate of return will be for those plans, that helps us make better decisions on behalf of plan members, retirees, actives, and the state of Minnesota.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. And Representative O'Driscoll this time.
These are very valuable discussions that may be not placed in the right part of the agenda and where we're at, but these are extremely important. And maybe I can just put this out there and we can move on. Senator Friends, your comment about, the rate of return and what happens, the thing we also need to keep in mind on that is if we don't hit that rate of return, we still have that same internal problem. One of the other things that we have that can affect this, other than just the rate of return, to Senator Nelson's question and comments, that when we do a census of the pension group, what's their life expectancy? The longer life expectancy extends, that also has a dramatic impact on the ability to be able to have funds and resources available to pay those. When we look at the 2018 bill, which was the last major piece of legislation that took almost 3 years through the commission and the legislature to address these issues, one of the things that we were concerned about was if we didn't adjust the rate of return at that point, how is Wall Street and the bond houses going to look at Minnesota when we go to sell bonds and to refinance? So when we talk about the taxpayers, if you're paying at a higher rate of interest because you're not taking your unfunded liabilities seriously and addressing those to the comfort of the people who want to invest or lend money to the state of Minnesota, you've got some problems on your hands because you're going to pay an awful lot more. So the taxpayers are affected by that as well. So these are probably some things that we maybe should have a discussion at some point, the inner workings and pulling this lever and what happens over here and kind of the lay of the table, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Driscoll. And we actually do have it planned to have a discussion on the assumed rate of return. So we will dive deeper into this topic. And I know this has been robust conversation, but I am going to excuse our presenters because we do have MSRS and PARA who will be presenting together. And so thank you, Mr. Schulte and Ms. Knutson. Did you get the others? Okay, thank you. And when you're settled, please identify yourself and begin your presentation.
Doug Anderson, Executive Director for the Public Employees Retirement Association.
And I'm Erin, Leonard, the Executive Director of MSRS. So we'll try to go through these quickly. Thank you for having us today and welcome to the 2023 Pension Commission. This is sorry.
And I know, since we only have about 10 minutes left, if we don't get through everything, I know that I really want us to have a good foundation for the discussions we're going to have this year. And we are starting our commission meetings earlier than we have in the past, that if we need to, we will invite our presenters back for, at another point in time.
All right, so the Minnesota State Retirement System, you've heard a lot of this before, so I won't repeat it. We administer a mix of defined benefit and defined contribution plans. We have an 11-member board of directors, and their responsibilities include setting our policies, approving our budget, and then considering disability and other appeals. The defined benefit plan and unclassified plan provisions are in state statute. Our other defined contribution plans, deferred compensation and healthcare savings plan, are governed by a plan document or IRS code. Any updates in this presentation are as of June 30th, 2022, when we achieved a negative 6.4% return. So just to give you that context. I'm gonna go through our general plan a little bit slower because all of the information is in the same format, so you should be able to follow along in the other plans. So our general plan is our largest plan. It covers most state employees, University of Minnesota, Met Council. Currently, on a market value basis, assuming the 7.5% return, we're 98.5% funded. So well-funded plan, that's one of the measurements of health of a pension plan. We have 126,555 members, and the average initial benefit for our members is just $1,783 a month last year. So not large pensions, but a modest benefit available to public employees. As mentioned, there's a combination of employee and employer contributions. Current employees are contributing 6% to pay. The employer is contributing 6.25 for a total of 2.25%. That's in statute. The contribution, what is contributed is in statute. Our total required contribution to pre-fund benefits is 8.73%. So that means we are collecting more than we need, which is a good thing to have a contribution sufficiency in this plan. Our current post-retirement increase for retirees was 1% until next year. It will go up to 1.5%, and that was part of the 2018 legislation. So the prior conversation leads into this next slide, which compares those same numbers at a 7% return assumption. So our board is proposing legislation this year to reduce our assumed rate of return from 7.5 to 7. You'll see that the funded ratio goes down from 98.51 to almost 93% funded. Our contribution sufficiency decreases from 3.52% to just about a percent of pay. And our full funding dates are a projection. All have an amortization goal of reaching full funding by 2048. In the general plan, we would have reached it in 2024 if we keep that higher assumed rate of return. It pushes back to 2036 if we assume a 7% return. I won't go through all the numbers, but for the correctional plan, this plan is it's early retirement. It's individuals who are working with offenders or patients either in the prisons or the state hospitals. This plan does have a full retirement of age 55 because of the nature of the work that they do. Some of the differences is the contributions. You'll note their contributions are higher. They're paying more for their benefits. The employer benefit is also higher because the value of the benefits is greater. In 2018, there was a supplemental contribution as part of this bill, a part of the fix for this, and their post-retirement increase is 1.5%. This is the only plan from MSRS plans that goes to a deficiency if we assume a 7% rate of return, but we still reach full funding by 2048. The State Patrol plan is the licensed peace officers for the state. The things to note about this plan is it's a very volatile plan. It's a high retiree liability, higher than active. We have more retirees than active members, but still well-funded. You'll note that the sufficiency is much greater than you see in our larger plans. That's partially because of the volatility of this plan. So last year, that sufficiency was over 20%, and you can see how much a bad market year impacts that sufficiency and that funded ratio. Our judges plan is our smallest plan, again, a higher retiree liability. It is a higher multiplier because a lot of judges start later in their careers into this profession. And the good news with this plan, it is only 60% funded at 7%. We still have a contribution sufficiency, but it didn't start pre-funding until 1992. So it has a long history. We can talk about it someday if you're curious, but that is why the funded ratio is much lower than the other plans. Our other plans, I won't go too much into it. Our deferred compensation plan, the 457, is supplemental. It's the fourth largest in the country. We're nearing 100,000 participants in that plan, and we have over $8.5 billion. We also administer a healthcare savings plan, which is a defined contribution plan. And then you all are in the unclassified plan, which has some DB plan features. Legislators plan, we have fewer than 10 active legislators in that plan. It's closed in 1997. Here's a history of the funded ratio, if you're curious. Our projections going to 2048, so all of our plans reach full funding by 2048 except for our judge's plan, which is 2063. And then here's a summary of all the liabilities, contribution sufficiencies, deficiencies, and full funding dates, assuming a 7% return. So by decreasing that assumed rate of return to 7%, we do increase our liabilities. It doesn't change how things are invested, but we still reach full funding except for the judge's plan. Couple things this year, we have that reduction for the assumed rate of return, we have an administrative bill, and then just some things to consider. We are hearing a lot from stakeholders about inflation relief, and then potentially one-time funding to reduce our unfunded liabilities. Doug.
Mr. Anderson, can I just ask, we only have about 5 minutes left, and I don't want you all to feel like you have to rush through your presentations. If the members are okay with this, I would actually like to maybe move your part of the presentation to next week's meeting to give us sufficient time to ask questions. And maybe if Ms. Leonard, if you want to maybe just open, if you can just take some questions now, and if people still have further questions, I want to be respectful of time, but we can always come back and ask those questions next week as well. Are members okay with that? Okay, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Leonard? We went through that really quickly, but any questions? Okay, seeing that there are no member questions, I would rather let you all out a few minutes early than late from this. And Mr. Anderson, my apologies, but we'll have to ask you to come back next week, and then we can ask all the questions to you. So with that, members, that is the end of our meeting. Our next commission hearing will be on Monday, January 30th. We will be hearing from the Teachers Retirement Association and St. Paul Teachers Retirement, in addition to what we did not finish today. So seeing no further business in front of the committee, this meeting is adjourned.